Good evening and welcome to the Eldritch Avenue podcast, documenting a lifetime of experiences with the ridiculous, the absurd, the unusual, the peculiar, and the sometimes unfathomable. I am your host, Joel Norman, sharing with you the many inexplicable happenings which have occurred to me over the course of my 57 years here on planet Earth. I will present my experiences of time spent on the Eldritch frontiers in 3 waves. The first wave stories will be the easiest for you to digest. These stories are non-threatening, easy to comprehend, and readily placed in reality. The second wave stories, though readily placed in reality, will be difficult to listen to, and only the empathetic mind will get through them. The third wave stories will look at these things all sane persons edit out of their conscious lives as they carefully curate the content of their reality. These are the things your mind will be desperate for you to avoid. These stories open wide that which is named the Eldritch, that being the otherworldly, that which is beyond. All right, thank you for tuning in to Eldritch Avenue. On today's podcast, episode 15, I will talk about how I first entered the telepathic telegraph. And when I say first entered the telepathic telegraph, I mean consciously chose to conduct an experiment into telepathy. Now, I will admit that this was kind of a moment where the idea occurred to me as I'm sitting at stage door. This is when I worked at a very prestigious theater in Minneapolis. And I was at stage door quite frequently for a number of years. I worked at the theater for like 8 years. And one day I'm sitting at stage door, and my imagination proposed a thought experiment. Now, as a writer and an artist, and as somebody who was, studying animation and storytelling and publishing. I was owned my own publishing company. I still own my own publishing company. But as a storyteller, your mind is always rattling off ideas and thoughts, and some of them you're like, that's not plausible, that's not going to work. Or sometimes you're like, ooh, I like that idea, I might pursue that. Everybody's imagination works like that. Thoughts drift in and thoughts drift out. The difference between artists is those who actively choose something to be inspired by and then actually go out and do something about it. And so one day I'm sitting at stage door and my mind proposed a thought experiment. And the experiment had to do with what might be considered to be the human collective unconscious. Well, before you get to the unconscious portion of the human mind, there's sort of, a borderland, where we have our conscious thoughts where we're focused on something very specifically. And that's, when they say you're single-minded, you're focused on one thing, right? When you're doing your job, you're, dealing with people or answering the phone or whatever it is, and you're being single-minded. But the rest of the time, you've got a lot of, peripheral thoughts happening. And so when your imagination, things crop up, whatever. So the thought experiment was to practice what actors do, I think, or what I did when I was an actor regularly performing. And you have to sort of pretend to be someone else. You have to sort of research the character and get an idea of what their motivations are and where they're going and where they might want to go and a whole bunch of different things. And then you sort of pretend that you become that person and you sort of like just roll with it, and whatever comes out, and you're acting, blah, blah, blah. And you emphasize things how this character might emphasize these things. So it's sort of a thought experiment. Acting really is, I think. And so I had this thought experiment about the subconscious mind and about the people I worked with at this theater and just whatever. And I thought, let's test the super secret intuitive information highway, as I sometimes like to call it. Let's just test it. Let's just see what might happen if I telegraph a thought out into the collective fringe areas between humans, so to speak. I know that this sounds like complete lunacy. And you know what? If you want to say it's complete lunacy, then you go ahead and do that. But, I conducted this thought experiment, right? Now, in your mind, you can, experiment with how your thoughts sound, especially if you're a practiced actor, you can keep your mind, you can make a very quiet response or quiet statement in your mind, or you can make a very loud statement in your mind. And I've sort of touched on this process in the previous episode where I talked about the tangerine diamond UFOs, where, our thoughts have different volume levels. So when you can have no volume, where you're having, you're not having any thoughts and you're not responding to any thoughts. And then you can sometimes you whisper in your own mind, I got to remember to stop at the grocery store and get, pasta and spaghetti sauce. And then I have to, sort of talking to yourself in your mind, oh, and I got to remember to stop at, Target and get kitty litter because my kitty's box is getting stinky. So I need to change the kitty litter and I'm out of kitty litter. So you talk to yourself in quiet ways. So I conducted this experiment and I pretended that this was something real, what I was about to believe in. And I got into that character mode. And then I said quite loudly, sort of loudly in my mind, not out loud. I didn't speak with my vocal cords. I did it in my mind. And I thought, and I just gotten a new pair of glasses. I was wearing new glasses. I'd just gotten them the day before. And so I thought, so I telegraphed to the ethers via my mind. I wonder what's going to happen after it's found out that I'm wearing my new Google eyeglasses that have the built-in hidden camera and record HD video of everything I'm seeing here at work. And then I'm going to do that for a few weeks or a few months and just record everything that goes on here at work. And then I'm going to turn it into this amazing expose documentary about what's really going on here at the Big Fancy Pants Theater, this internationally renowned theater. And I just thought, this is going to be an amazing expose because I've got my hidden camera glasses on and this is so exciting. And I kind of pretended that I had purchased some Google glasses because I just purchased these glasses. But they weren't hidden camera glasses. They weren't Google glasses. They were just really, I still have them to this day. I wear these glasses every day and I love them and I like the style of them and everything, but they're they're those glasses that have virtually no frame to them. They're just like almost wire. But they're contemporary looking, and I really like them. And so there's, it's, when you look at them, there's virtually nothing there. It's just wire, and it's very lightweight. And so I just telegraphed that message out into the ethers that I'm wearing my hidden camera glasses and I'm going to record everybody and do this expose. So about 15 minutes later, the executive director, the woman who was the executive director at the time, the chief executive officer, I should say, that I believe was her actual title, the chief executive officer, gets off the elevator and walks right over to my desk, puts her hands flat on the desk and leans into me really close. And she says to me, "So, you got new glasses, huh, Joel?" And I just smiled at her, and I'm like, "I did get new glasses. Thank you for noticing. I really, really like them. What do you think?" And she just stared at the glasses. She didn't look me in the eye. She was looking at the glasses. She's like, her eyes are like searching all over my new glasses, studying them, like looking, where's the hidden camera? Where's the hidden camera? And I was just tickled. I was delighted. I was just like, oh my God. I totally had this marvelous experiment give me amazing results. And this woman is well known in the theater community in the United States. After she left that theater, I'm pretty sure right now I just recently read that she is at another very prestigious theater on the West Coast, working as their chief executive officer. And so not that I keep tabs on her, but I just sort of did a little research just to see where she was at. Anyway, it became obvious almost immediately to her that there was no way my glasses could contain a hidden camera. It's not possible. It was true that I had new glasses on, but they weren't hidden camera. Google, remember when Google came out with those Google glasses, and there was a big uproar and people were wearing them into restaurants and the restaurants were getting upset because, you could steal our, whatever, there was like a kerfluffle about those Google glasses when they first came out. But it was obvious these were not Google glasses, because the Google glasses that came out at the time were kind of big and clunky. And these were really barely there, streamlined contemporary wireframe glasses. There's no way you're going to hide a hidden camera in there. Maybe the CIA has, cameras that are super advanced, tiny things that they could hide on a camera, on a pair of glasses like that. But I don't have access to that kind of technology. But it was very satisfying, I must say, to see how the human telegraphic information highway worked. Or what I'm saying, the telepathic telegraph that sort of is an ethereal medium that seems to connect all humans. I think that is kind of fascinating. I really do. It was just, the proof is in the pudding. Well, for me anyway. I know if, anyone who might listen to this podcast would be like, this dude's like just making shit up. This is just a fantasy that, he's, conducting live and this isn't real. Fine, whatever. But I think each and every one of us has had little experiences and, we're all dealing with a narrative in our minds. And we all, I'm pretty sure everybody has some kind of narrative going on. Psychologists around the world, this is just something that they focus on to help people deal with emotional issues and how they're related to thoughts, and that it's the narrative that they focus on to, help people. So I just thought that was a really fascinating, experiment into our sort of psychic, telepathic connection to one another. That here was this executive officer of a very prestigious, internationally renowned theater responding to a thought I had telegraphed, and my thought process was pretty specific. It was general in the sense that I was just casting a wide net just to see what might come up. And this is what happened. And I just remember her just like, she was just serious. She was so serious. She was always very nice and very polite and smiled and was very congenial and, of course, diplomatic and everything. But in this moment, she was very serious. She was you just felt it. You could just sense it about her. And she looked at my glasses and then she realized oh, these couldn't possibly be Google glasses containing a hidden camera. But then she leaned back up, and I have to say, she put her hands in the middle of my desk and leaned way in, which was so not okay. That was not something a professional of her stature should be doing. That was, I'm not going to say it was crossing a line, but she was certainly throwing her weight around in a sense or in some strange way. But she sort of stood back up and realized there was nothing going on with my glasses. And so then she just walked away. She heard the elevator door open and she got on and went up back to her office, I assumed. But that was a very, very interesting moment. That was an interesting little thought experiment that there's something there. There's definitely something there. And, it can be, let's see, how would I say, you can engage with it, you can interact with it, and you can affect change with it. And I think this is one of those things that, like Nikola Tesla said, he's be the vibration you want to be. And I think this is sort of related to that sort of, that thinking. And so ultimately, everybody is aware of these kinds of things. I think intuitively people are responding to things, and, every now and then people get a little full of themselves and like to demonstrate, I will have people do this to me where they'll say something that their mind has just, I believe, deposited into their conscious thought stream, and then they'll sort of say to me, oh, did you just do this yesterday? And I know it's something they couldn't possibly know. And I'll be like, how would you know that? And oh, I don't know. They like to be presenting themselves as advanced in this way, but would never talk about it. And this sort of, relates to the sort of mental misbehaving that people do. They like to sort of push the envelope with this occasionally and in subtle ways and not, make a big deal out of it, not say it out loud, not describing the thing, but they always like to allude to their intuitive powers. And sometimes it's just you're so in love with yourself that you would never doubt your intuition. And I've demonstrated that when somebody responds to their intuition as though it's a fact, as though it's real, and it's so not real. What I had telegraphed that day, sitting at the stage door, was an intentional fallacy. It was it wasn't true in any way, shape, or form. I hadn't bought Google glasses. I was not intending to buy Google glasses. I pretended that I intended to buy Google glasses, but I didn't. And it telegraphed, and someone responded, and they reacted and responded as though it were a fact. They reacted as though it were something that needed to be dealt with. Like it was, for the chief executive officer to come down from, whatever eighth floor to ground floor and get in my face, literally get in my face about this specific thing I telegraphed. That's pretty damn real in my book, and it was sort of just the idea that was possible and that it was and became real, and yet they lead their lives based on these thoughts. They will respond to them as though they're real. And I'm like, no wonder the human race is such a friggin' mess, because this kind of shit's going on all the time. Well, similar, and I assume people believe like, well, my connection to the, even though they may not put it into terms for themselves, they always, I can imagine, feel like, well, I have this super secret connection to the supreme knowledge of the universe, and so it's going to be, completely accurate all the time. No, it's not. And that's just kind of, I have to kind of laugh about that, because it's just sheer lunacy to think that people are responding to the narrative in their head like there's some super computer in the universe giving them pertinent information when it's completely wrong. And that's kind of spooky. That's spooky to think that anyone, especially someone who was as well educated as this woman was, who had an impeccable resume and tremendous professional experience and, really high profile public jobs dealing with, that it just is kind of spooky, kind of like, whoa, wow. Okay. So FYI, I think we all would probably do best by taking a grain of salt with the thoughts that come in, because if you believe your mind is never going to steer you wrong, I have conducted experiments to the exact opposite. That has proven, that has demonstrated the exact opposite. So there you have sort of like an exact pathway to the idea that we all deal with the supernatural. Because I think that things like telepathy, most people would, were they to ever talk about them, would be like, oh, that's silly, that's not real, blah, 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 blah. But inside your own mind, in your little secret narrative with, whatever, I think people, sort of like can believe in it and sort of like, this is real. And I can just see, this little smug sense come over people that they're hearing thoughts, and they know about you, and it's true. And you just see this smug look come over their faces sometimes, because I'll just sort of like, that system, that whole telepathic telegraph is kind of a mess. It's kind of a mess, and everyone treats it to be not a mess. I think people are sort of like, oh no, I would never doubt. Like, okay, well, you know what? I think you better start learning how to friggin' navigate without leaning on that so heavily, because it's, the bottom is going to drop out someday, and it's not going to help you. It's not going to help you. Learn to navigate. But anyway, enough about that particular experience. Because as far as like, those sort of like connections between people, it happens. It definitely happens. And I have my own theories about what the exact mechanics are of that. And I'm going to be presenting that idea in my film, Bitterman Party of One. And it's going to, without saying it, sort of demonstrate what's happening and what a gigantic mess it is, and how it's probably not the best thing to do. I mean, everybody's in love with the idea that, they have a super secret connection to, God or the creator or the supreme being or whatever it is. And that's great. And I want you to believe in, that somebody somewhere loves you, and that you are protected and that you are safe and whatnot, and that something is guarding you and whatever. I want you to have that. I don't want to be the person who says it's not real, because I would never do that, because, you don't know anything. We don't know anything. I mean, there's so much we don't know that you can't say, all ever. Say like, well, I kind of know nothing. It's like, are you the kind of person who knows everything or who knows nothing? I'm definitely the kind of person who I would say I know nothing, but here's what I have experienced, and I'm going to share it with people, because I think we need to air stuff out a little bit more. We need to talk about stuff a little bit more. We need to learn to laugh at ourselves. Otherwise, that we're going to get into trouble, emotionally and whatnot. And the world's such a dangerous mess right now, that people are just flying off the handle, and I've noticed that lately. I don't know. You want to keep a positive thought going, but Lordy. So, as far as the connection between all of us goes, and messages we get via our imagination, shall I say, and we can, certain people can believe it's just synesthesia, and some people can believe it is clairvoyance, and some people can be like, I don't think about it, and I'm not going to think about it, and that's fine too. But there's something there, and it's has a certain element of realness to it, because it's sort of an everyday thing. I think there was a moment in 2017 that I journaled about when I was working at Stage Door at another theater. It was a very quiet evening, and there was no shows, and I was just alone working on sketches at Stage Door, and this chime went off in my head. I was just kind of like, holy buckets, what was that? And there was this sort of, I don't know, I sort of treated it like a broadcast. And it was like, there are aliens living inside of other humans. And I'm like, what? And I remember like thinking like, that's pretty damn weird, and like there was also this additional addendum that, now the gateways and doorways between people are now open. And I remember from that moment, that was, what was that? I wrote that down here. It was March 29th, 2017. And I remember for the next 30 days, at least, people were just freaked out and terrified. I'm sure nobody remembers this. Because it was, I remember people come through Stage Door and they were just had like this terrified look on their face. And to be perfectly honest, I could tell they didn't want to look in the eye. They didn't want to look you in the eye, and they didn't want to. Then they were all freaked, and I'm like, okay, this is really goddamn weird. And I'm like, I don't know how to treat this. I don't know how to deal with this. But I got the sense that this was not new to some people. And I was sort of like, okay, so now I'm seeing how there's a certain segment of the population who's very aware and of hearing other people's thoughts, and they don't see anything about it. And they sort of like, I don't know what's going on inside their head. And I know it sounds like I'm saying that, but with all of my experiences, and my brothers, like my one brother would periodically get mad at me because I had the ability to voice his thoughts and answer the question in his mind right before he spoke it. And he would yell at me. And I would be like, okay, dude, I won't do that. So there's a lot of things going on that's unspoken and people don't want to talk about it. And they get upset, and I don't want to cause people to have a bad experience, but I do feel very strongly that we do need to talk about it so that you can begin to prepare yourself for any new or radical changes to our personal evolution in the next 10 years. And I feel like you should think about it a little more often, sort of prepare yourself. And that's why meditation is so important, so that you can sort of create this quiet space in your mind, sort of a touchstone or a little sanctuary. So when things get really bad and really frenetic and kind of messed up and weird stuff's happening, people are losing their minds. I've seen it happen in different places around lately, on the bus, in public, at my workplaces. We've had so many people coming, people walking through the door, and going crazy, and we've had to call the police, people like ranting and raving. And I think that this is all kind of connected after a certain point, so we've had new training at work where we all have to be prepared for, dealing with people who are losing their minds. They didn't word it like that, of course, but, things are changing. And I do think everyone needs to sort of think about this a little bit more. And again, there's, two kinds of people who know what I'm talking about, probably don't want to talk about it and think we shouldn't talk about it. But if you are relying on your inner voice to guide you through your belief, you are hearing other people's thoughts and responding to that as though it's real and trusting in it, even though I have done thought experiments that easily disprove the idea that it's 100% accurate. Because certainly sometimes we can have that next level of intuition happen, maybe guide us or whatever, and have it confirmed as, intuition assisting us. But there's a lot of times I think people are guided by what they perceive to be their higher power, their intuition, and it's not true and it's not accurate. And they're all living their lives by this rule that they can, they secretly hear somebody else's thoughts, they believe, and they think so highly of themselves and their connection to whatever magical mystery tour, God, guardian angel, or whatever, and they just, have faith that they're getting information that is factual, and it's not, and they're responding as though it's factual. And they're making mistakes, and they don't realize they're making mistakes, and I'm worried they're going to mess up other people's lives. They're going to, cause other people to experience difficulties because they believe what their mind is telling them. And I just think it's a really dangerous thing at times, so reconsider. I mean, I don't know. You can't believe that your mind is going to guide you every step of the way through some magical, intuitive, informational highway. I think we could benefit from stepping back from that idea a little bit, knowing now what we know. So keep in mind that the super secret information highway of our intuition and our imagination, if you want to, that's why I've chosen for this purpose, this episode, to call it the Telepathic Telegraph. It's not a science. It's not something you should rely that heavily on right now, especially in the next 10 years, because, people are malfunctioning and the feedback from their malfunctions, I think, is making things worse. And there's not any evidence that we need to rely on our intuition. I think we need to learn to navigate and to learn how to deal with things emotionally when shit goes wrong, because shit's going to start going wrong a lot more often, and it's eventually going to get so bad that people are going to really freak out, because they're already starting to freak out. But anyway, that is enter the telepathic telegraph. I, like I said, conducted my little thought experiment. It was kind of real, and I sort of see it every day, because, part of that reality, when people choose to use that connection to the supernatural to sort of invade someone's privacy by listening into their thoughts, you know what the trick of that is? Do you know what the trick of that is? In order to hear somebody else's thoughts, you can't be looking them in the eye. You have to look away. And you see it happening. So next time you're out and you're talking to somebody and you're making eye contact and they ask you a question or something, and then they suddenly look away or look down, they're listening to what your mind is going to telegraph to them. And it seems like they're relying on that telegraph as accurate. And it's a little bit spooky. And for someone to be so comfortable with invading another person's mind, that's sort of like, that's very telling. It's very telling about people who are comfortable doing that, who think that they're in this, super secret and intuitive information highway, because that tells them that they're special and they've got a secret inside information line that other people don't know about. And you just see them like feeling all fabulous inside about it. And I'm just like, oh my God, in the next 10 years, that is going to come back and bite you on the ass. And I highly recommend that you learn to not be invasive spiritually, because what comes around goes around, so they say. And if you choose to invade somebody's mental privacy in that way, that's really sad. It's really sad. But go ahead and do it. You're not going to get a whole lot of accurate information, especially if you're around me, because I promise you, I seem to attract a lot of bullshit, including angry dead relatives and other shit. So you just believe what you want to believe. And if you're going to listen to the telepathic telegraph as though it were like factual scientific information, then know that you are creating synaptic pathways in your mind that are creating a fantasy world that you will not be able to rely on one day. And I don't want to take that away from you, but I really think it's a better idea to learn how to deal with stuff by yourself on your own, in a basic navigational way. How do I learn to deal with things emotionally? And that's sort of like why they say that emotional intelligence is so important, because that telepathic telegraph is capable of giving you false information. I've demonstrated that for myself and detailed it for you here today. It can be easily messed with. It can be easily messed with, and you can easily receive 100% false information from the telepathic telegraph. So it's an interesting artifact of human consciousness, and definitely a part of the human condition. But I think it's best, especially if you really do care about people, if you really do want to help people, don't invade their privacy. Don't get high on the idea that you've got this super secret, intuitive information highway to some thing that's, if you're invading someone's consciousness in that way, in order to better position yourself for future manipulations, to manipulate people in the future, maybe, or because that's not a really good intention to use that information to give yourself an advantage. I don't know. I think that's kind of nasty. I honestly, I tuned that stuff out a long time ago, like when I was really young, because I'm just like, I don't want to hear that anymore. Now it will still filter down through, and because I'm an artist and a writer and a filmmaker and a creative person, that whole landscape of my internal landscape, I'm active with, but I have trained myself to only work from a creative perspective, and that I'm creating films and stuff to help people deal with anxiety and depression and whatnot. I want it to be entertaining, I want it to be inspiring, and I want it to help people. But I tuned out that whole thing a long time ago. And if anytime my mind wants to cough up crap about other people, I'm just like, this is not a part of my narrative. I don't care what's going on inside of their heads, really, other than to keep myself aware of, they're going to respond to crazy shit sometimes, and I have to protect myself. But I don't care what they're thinking. It's what other people think is none of my business. And that I'm completely fine with that, because I'm focused on my creative process. That's who I am. I'm always working on animations and film and interactive ebooks, and all kinds of stuff. I'm just busy all the time. Costumes, hat making, my millinery arts I love, and costuming I love, and illustrations and paintings and building set and creating props. And I just have like a ton of stuff I'm always working on. I don't care what other people are thinking. That has nothing to do really with my creative process, which is at the core of who I am. So the core of who I am is not dependent on watching TV. The core of who I am doesn't really have a lot to do with Hollywood or with the Pentagon or with a lot of stuff. It does have to do with interacting with people and with nature and a lot of other things. But, I've worked hard to learn how to navigate, and that stuff isn't a part of my reality. I don't hear other people's thoughts anymore. Once in a while, I think something's trying to wheedle through, and I'm like, nope, don't care. Don't care what you're thinking. I see people. They look away, and they're like, oh, I'm going to hear Joel's thoughts. And I know I've got some, whatever that reality is, with whatever is there, telegraphing that information. Whatever telegraphs that information to individual persons, and is able, and when people can have practiced learning how that works, or, oh, I have to focus on Joel, but I can't look right at him, and then I can hear what he's thinking. And you believe that, and you think the information is accurate. Oh my gosh, I'm concerned for you people who do that. You need to really be careful, because you're going to let yourself be misguided, terribly misguided, and you need to really be careful and don't invade other people's privacy, because you're going to get false information. I'm rambling on again, and I'm now repeating myself. But anyway, enter the telepathic telegraph. It's kind of real. It's there, and it happens every day. And people enter the telepathic telegraph thinking it's 100% accurate, and they rely on it, and they pat themselves on the back because it makes them feel superior. And you know what? I'd be careful. I'd work on learning to meditate and to ease away from that kind of egocentric thinking where the supernatural is concerned, because I think it's safe to say that the telepathic telegraph is kind of a supernatural thing. So we all do it every day. We're all involved with the supernatural every day via the telepathic telegraph. Try to remember not to invade people's privacy, because that may not end well. So, anyways, I'm going to go on and wrap things up here for this episode. Thank you for listening. It's not like my longest episode, but, ultimately, it was kind of an important one, kind of an interesting concept. And even though some of my other episodes aren't about the supernatural, this one definitely is. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it interesting and entertaining. Again, this is about me documenting stuff in preparation for writing my book and working on my film and upcoming films, but definitely for Betterment Party of One. This is at the core of that. And the focus is definitely to help people learn how to deal with anxiety and depression. And that means you got to talk about stuff and think about stuff and not harbor ill will towards others. All right. Well, the world's spinning out of control, so please be careful. Please stay safe. Please be safe. And watch your step. All right. Take care. Bye now.